Hare Krishna. Sorry, we're experiencing technical difficulties. We got the bat out of the room, and I guess the camera's working now again. So we were saying that between the husband and wife, it must not be familiarity that breeds contempt. According to Vedic civilization, a wife cannot call her husband by name, which is something that you see in India still. The wife rarely will say the husband's name out loud. She'll say Prabhu, but my Prabhu, but she won't say his name. But in America, a large percentage of the ladies haven't imbibed that aspect of the culture yet. And then in the 4th canto, Srila Prabhupada explained how if a husband and wife are satisfied with one another, then the goddess of fortune automatically comes. And the converse is there that if there are fights, the goddess of fortune will not be there. She will leave. But when there are no fights, the goddess of fortune automatically comes to the house. A woman becomes beautiful by her chastity and faithfulness to her husband. In India, a husband is still called Pati Guru, the wife's spiritual master. If husband and wife are attached to one another for advancement in Krishna consciousness, their relation of cooperation is very effective for such advancement. A man should be trained to be a first-class devotee of Lord Krishna, and a woman should be trained to be a very chaste follower of her husband. That will make the lives of both of them happy. By staying chaste and faithful to her husband, a woman enriches herself with supernatural power. If a wife wants to be happy with her husband, she must try to understand her husband's temperament and please him. This is victory for a woman. A man should be an ideal servant of the Lord, and a woman should be an ideal wife like the goddess of fortune. Then both husband and wife will be so faithful and strong that by acting together, they will return home, back to Godhead, without a doubt. In this regard, Srila Madhvacharya gives this opinion: a woman should think of her husband as the Supreme Lord. Similarly, a disciple should think of the spiritual master as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In this way, all of them will automatically become devotees of the Lord. In other words, by thinking this way, all of them will become Krishna conscious. And this is the last quote from the Bhagavatam. However great a woman may be, she must place herself before her husband as his maidservant. That is to say, she must be ready to carry out her husband's orders and please him in all circumstances. Then her life will be successful. A woman must be trained to be submissive to the will of her husband. Westerners contend that this is a slave mentality for the wife, but factually it is not. It is the tactic by which a woman can conquer the heart of her husband. So just see that people will say, if you want to be submissive and serve your husband, what's the difference between you and a slave? It's just like you're being a slave. But no, actually, it's just the opposite. By doing that, by serving your husband nicely, that's the tactic, Prabhupada says, by which the woman can conquer the heart of her husband. So it's a very subtle and very nice point. And if one can think about it a little and understand that, it will go a great way to help society. Because actually, 5,000 years ago, of course the Bhagavad Gita was first spoken millions of years ago, but written down 5,000 years ago when Lord Krishna was on the planet. This was one of the series of verses right in the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Adharma bhibhavat Krishna. You know, so what is that? When irreligion is prominent in the family, O Krishna, the women of the family become corrupt. And from the degradation of womanhood comes unwanted progeny. When there is an increase of unwanted population, a hellish situation is created. Due to the evil deeds of the destroyers of family tradition, all kinds of community projects and family welfare activities are devastated. O Krishna, maintainer of the people, I have heard by disciplic succession that those who destroy family traditions dwell always in hell. So what are they saying here? They're saying that when there's irreligion, when it becomes prominent in the family, then the women become corrupt. And by women becoming corrupt, it means that they are able to mingle loosely with men and act loosely. And when that happens, then unwanted progeny comes. It means then the women can become pregnant, they might not even have a husband. And from that, all this unwanted progeny, everything goes to hell. All of society becomes corrupted and falls apart. Goes down the drain, so to speak. So actually, when Grandfather Bhishma was dying on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, he gave his advice. His advice was that a woman's shyness is the valve to control. Means if their shyness is broken, it will create disaster. So we should not give freedom to that type of activity. Because in the present age of Kali, people are manda sumanda matayo. This means bad because of lower class tendencies, lower mentality. There's free mingling of men and women. This is prominent. And previously, among the higher classes, the Brahmins, means the intelligent class of men. The Kshatriyas, means the administrators. And the Vaishyas, the mercantile community. There was no chance of men and women to mingle freely. This was just the Vedic culture. But in the Shudra community, such mingling was open. And because now we're in the age of Kali, and there's no cultural education, at least in the West. There's still something is there, some vestiges are left, a little bit is left in India. But everyone is spiritually untrained, and everyone is therefore acts like a low-class person, like a Shudra. And therefore they gradually become unfortunate and always disturbed. So that's why Grandfather Bhishma thought it was so important to get this point across that a woman's shyness is the valve control, and that shyness should not be broken. Otherwise, it'll create disaster. So, also I wanted to mention, I brought this book, Sri Bhakti Siddhanta Vaibhava. It's by our godbrother, His Holiness Bhakti Vikash Swami. He spent 20 years writing it. It's the definitive book about our Param Guru, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj. And there's a section in here called Regarding Women. So this will give us some idea of what it was like to be a devotee, a lady devotee, 50, 60, 80 years ago, like that. And we think now, okay, I joined the movement in 1974, and back then it was very unusual, for example, for ladies to give lectures, the Bhagavatam class. We do now, I mean, quite a number of ladies. I started giving lectures not until like about the year 2000, so imagine for 10 years I've been. But that means that I've been in the movement now for 36 years. So that means for the first 26 years that I'm in the movement, I never gave lectures. Now I give lectures, yes, and especially in the universities too. Go to the universities, and but I didn't. And anyway, well, let's see something about what it, I was very surprised to read this myself. So now we're talking about in the 1920s here and the 1930s. Okay. Although women were welcome to visit for darshan and other functions, the standard decorum of restricting association between females and sadhus was rigidly observed. During lectures and similar proceedings, men and women sat well apart on separate large rugs, often hidden from each other by a bamboo screen. So they actually had a screen up. So, say if the sannyasi is lecturing, he wouldn't even see the ladies. They'd be behind the screen. They could hear him perfectly well, but they also couldn't see him. So I was very impressed when I heard this. I mean, very surprised. I had no idea that it was like that in the 1920s and 30s. Sri O.B.L. Kapoor recalled that his wife received Harinam from behind such a screen. That means she got initiated from behind the screen. She didn't even see her Guru Maharaj when she took Diksha. And it may be inferred that this was Srila Saraswati Thakur's standard practice for initiating females. Women were not allowed in the deity kitchen at that time, because the deity kitchen was considered an extension of the altar, and what to speak, women really weren't allowed on the altar. Although some older women were permitted to assist in cooking for the devotees, it says. So even today, in India, generally the women are not allowed on the altar. I mean, I've seen in some of the smaller temples, I remember Narayani used to serve the deities, or Radha Govinda in Calcutta, for example. I like that. But generally speaking, in the bigger temples, I mean, I've seen in Mumbai, Mayapur, and Vrindavan, the standard setting mandirs, the ladies are not allowed on the altar. However, the ladies can cook in some of the kitchens. So I believe, at least in Mumbai, for example, the ladies cook all the time, and Mayapur. But apparently, back then, in the 1920s and 30s, the ladies couldn't even cook in the kitchen. Imagine that. And I will say also that I remember us ladies did dress Krishna and Balaram a few evenings when the men pujaris were sick. Of course, this was like 20 years ago. I was living in Vrindavan, and we got to go on the altar and dress Krishna and Balaram. But I mean, that was like very, considered a very rare circumstance. And but although the ladies did not lecture back then, their philosophical writing was both appreciated and encouraged. They announced a women's essay competition on the subject Sadhvi Mahilara Hari Seva, devotional service by saintly women. Entries were submitted by mail, and a Shasti Devi locket was given to the winner of the competition. I thought that was sweet. Okay. So, do we have any questions yet? No questions. And, okay. So basically we see here that in general, irreligion will give degradation of the women, and then that leads to unwanted progeny, which leads to the downfall of the entire society. So Krishna consciousness, the ladies are taught to be chaste and humble and submissive, and we see that the great tactic to serving the husband is to be humble, faithful, submissive, serve with intimacy and respect. And it's not considered good for women to have the freedom to mingle with men like their equals, because we can't keep our propriety. It's and we see that it's the reciprocation of service and the love between the husband and wife that is the ideal of a householder's life. Breaking up again. Are we breaking up again? No? Okay. So if anybody has any questions, they can present them. And I have, in the meantime, I have a few stories about Prabhupada that I would like to share. One time in Hawaii, our god sister, her name is Mahavishnupriya. She's a native-born Hawaiian devotee, but she lives here in Alachua. So she was at the back of the temple room. Imagine Prabhupada was there, so the temple room was totally crowded, and she was way at the back, and she was just overcome with heartfelt emotion upon seeing her beloved Srila Prabhupada giving the lecture. So she was crying, and Srila Prabhupada looked and saw her, and he said, "These tears are putting out the fire of material existence." I have another god sister. We have another god sister who lives here in Alachua. Her name is Purnamasi, and in the early 70s she was living in Los Angeles. And one day in class, just as kind of a side point, Srila Prabhupada made a statement. He said, "Man can live alone on coconuts, bananas, and milk." So she thought about this, and she was helping to prepare his lunch. They made him a nice lunch, rice, dal, chapatis, salad, pakoras, chutney, like that, full lunch. And she thought, well, let me see, I'm going to make a salad for Prabhupada with coconuts, bananas, and whipped cream. So she made the salad, and they served Srila Prabhupada, and he didn't touch any of the traditional lunch, but he ate 2 bowls of her salad. And one time there was a nice darshan, and a lot of devotees were there. And Prabhupada looked up and he just said, "So, Ishan, are you remembering Krishna?" And Ishan was, "Well, Srila Prabhupada." And Prabhupada said, "That's all right. You just remember me remembering Krishna." We have another very nice god sister here in Alachua, and people before she took first initiation, a lot of different people just asked her, "What do you think your name is going to be?" So she said, "Well, my name, I'll probably get the name of Maya Devi because I'm always in Maya." So she told this to several people. So usually when Prabhupada would give Diksha, Harinam Diksha, give the spiritual names to the devotees, I mean always, whenever he would give a name, "Your name is Govinda Devi Dasi," everybody, "Jai!" Everybody, the whole room would erupt, "Jai! Srila Prabhupada, Jai!" So he gave her that day, he gave her name, "Your name is Mahamaya Dasi." And there was complete silence in the room. And then Prabhupada explained, just as there are phases of the moon, so Mahamaya is a phase of Radharani's energy. And then everybody said, "Jai!" We have another nice god sister who lives here. Her name is Sumati Devi. And she was telling me that in 1971, they recorded Krishna book stories for the radio in Boston. Satsvarup acted or portrayed the part of Krishna. Sumati was Mother Yashoda. And they sent the tapes to Prabhupada. And in the Kaliya serpent pastime, when Yashoda, Krishna was dancing on Kaliya Mardana, Krishna was dancing on the Kaliya serpent, and Mother Yashoda thought this is his certain death, and she was screaming, "Krishna!" She was screaming. So Srila Prabhupada, after he heard this, said, "Tell her she should always cry to Krishna like that." The scientist, Prabhupada was reading, and the scientist said, "This poison is colorless, odorless, and tasteless." So Srila Prabhupada said, "Who tested that it was tasteless?" Srila Prabhupada laughed when he heard this story. In Vrindavan, Prabhupada had a friend, Bhagatji. Bhagatji was also elderly. He was a little younger than Prabhupada, but he was in his 70s. And he had a sadhu friend. So him and his sadhu friend decided that they would go on holy pilgrimage to Govardhan. Govardhan is a town that's quite near to Vrindavan. It's also in Braj. It's about maybe 20 miles away. So they went there, and when they got there, Bhagachi told his friend, he said, I am feeling so purified. I just feel like going to the spiritual world. I just feel I can just go back home and go to the spiritual world right now. So the next morning, the sadhu said that he had had a dream, and Lord Krishna was in anxiety. So Bhagachi asked, why was my Lord in anxiety? And the sadhu said, he was feeling anxiety because you are coming to the spiritual world, but he does not have any Lipton tea. So Prabhupada laughed when he heard this. Pardon me? There's a question? Is it done? Where is it at? Okay. When the husband, for example, this is a question. When the husband, for example, is a drug addict and, for example, spending all the money and selling possessions, is there reference for what a woman is to do? If she can see it is not good what the husband is asking of her, or must she always obey his wishes? Okay, obviously, if the husband is requesting that the woman act sinfully or break the regulative principles, she's not bound to to follow him. But there's an example given of Srila Prabhupada's sister, Bhavacharini, who we call Pishima, means auntie in Bengali. And Pishima was married for many years to a man who was apparently drank and ate fish and was very difficult. But she served him very nicely, and then I heard that towards the end of his life he was, of course, somewhat purified and asked for forgiveness, etc. Had some realizations, in other words. But now you're saying this question is very heavy. If he's a drug addict and spending all the money and selling all your household possessions, my gosh, that's like a drastic situation. I'm really sorry to hear if somebody's in that situation. Then if that's the case, you have to, I'm certainly hoping that the wife would immediately go to some person that she trusts and reveal her heart, reveal the situation, and try to get some help. You don't think that you can deal with this on your own. You need help, and there are people that want to help, but you have to communicate properly. These are the principles of Sharanagati. Accept those things that are favorable for your devotion to God. Reject those things that are unfavorable. Consider that you're under the protection of Krishna in all circumstances. Accept Krishna as your maintainer. Surrender everything in his service. Cultivate a humble attitude. But this is such a drastic situation. A drug addict and spending all the money, my gosh, it's terrible. So you have to go. We have a lot of devotees now that are qualified as counselors and can help you. And it sounds very harmful, this situation. It sounds abusive and harmful. So please don't stand up to abuse like that. I mean, don't be the victim. You have to, take shelter of the devotees. There are devotees that can help you and that will. There's one of our god sisters, Urmila, is a counselor qualified. Bhakti Kaun is another counselor. There's probably wherever somebody lives, you can find somebody, an older devotee, or a qualified person that you can disclose your mind and heart to, and who can give you some good advice on what steps to take to hopefully help to rectify the situation. If the husband is a drug addict, he has to he's going to have to go into some type of a rehab to get out of that habit. Either that, or he would end up in jail, prison. So that would be the choice for him. I hope that gives you some type of an idea, an answer. Is there some other question there? What if the husband isn't faithful? Oh, is that's what they're? Oh, thanks for asking that. You mean they're asking, is that faithful to God or the wife? I'm pretty sure the question means isn't faithful to the wife. I think that's what that. I'm pretty sure that's what that means. It's Kali Yuga, and as we just saw in our readings tonight, unfortunately, we haven't been educated properly in the West. People are not properly educated, so if we remain faithful, we should be very thankful that, my God, despite my improper education, somehow I've grasped that it's important to be faithful in the marriage. And yeah, what to do if someone isn't faithful? Again, I would seek counsel from qualified devotees. There are devotees that are Actually, it'd be really nice if we could have the same system that I know at Chaupati. They have a good system of counselors, and devotees can meet up and they can express any difficulties they're going through, and devotees give them really wise counsel, and it's such an excellent system. I wish that could be instituted all over the world. You know, it's such an excellent system, because unfortunately a lot of times when devotees or get into problems, they may be reluctant to turn to somebody and reveal in confidence, and that's why it's so important to develop some good relationships with devotees. Prabhupada says in Bhagavad Gita, faith comes through association. So it's really important to develop at least a few deep relationships with other devotees so that we can get their counsel. Because I'm telling you, there's so many now. I mean, look, here in Alachua, we have hundreds of Prabhupada disciples, and the Prabhupada disciples have all been chanting Hare Krishna for 30 to 40 years. So imagine, just this morning, before I knew, I just found out I was to give this talk tonight. So I talked to a couple of my god sisters to ask for their advice. And I was factually astonished. They gave such good, excellent, spot-on advice. I mean, they would be such practical advice they gave. So please, I'm humbly begging, if somebody is feeling that they're in an abused situation, or a situation where you can see that your husband or wife is not faithful, please find one person that you can confide in, because certainly you don't want to create a scandal and something to get out to the public. That's not good. But find one person that you can confide in and ask that person what to do. And I think you'd probably be pleasantly surprised that devotees can give very excellent advice on something practical that you can do. I'm just thinking that if, let's just say that your spouse is doing something that is not pleasing to you, or something that's hurting you, I think it's good advice to to really try to develop better communication. If someone doesn't if someone does something that you don't like, the important thing is how we communicate with them. You can try by telling them, first of all, it's better not to try to communicate if somebody's, if there's in a fighting mood or some anger or friction. Better to just kind of be shunty and peaceful and wait until you can actually are in a calm mood. And not in a tense fighting mood. And then go to your spouse and start out by telling them 3 things that you appreciate about them and genuinely appreciate. I appreciate, Prabhu, that you are chanting your rounds every day, that you read Prabhupada's books, that you're maintaining the family. But I have an issue that's upsetting me, and it may not be your issue, but it's important to me. So I'm hoping that if I tell you how I feel, you can understand. You have to try to have a little bit deeper communication. So in other words, we have to compromise with each other. This is what marriage is. This is what relationship means. It means that there's some give and take. There's some compromise has to be there. Like Srila Prabhupada, in the beginning, we saw how he got so many of the devotees married. He didn't want them living together and not being married. But then, just in the early days, even by 1970-71, he was dismayed. I mean, that's putting it nicely. I think he was disgusted because he saw that so many of his disciples were divorcing, or they just weren't staying together. Even one time, Prabhupada, he said, if anyone wants to come and live in Vrindavan, they should sign a certificate saying that now they are finished with sex for good. So, anyway, the point being that we need better communication in order to stay together, to keep the marriage together. We should try to bend over backwards to communicate with a little deeper, and so we don't get into these big difficulties of people being unfaithful. I mean, it certainly happens. It happens left and right, and we have to try our best to eradicate that, to curb that. Is there some other question there? Somebody put there's a nice lady devotee in Prabhupada Village, which is North Carolina, called Archana Siddhi. She's awesome. I think they're saying as a counselor, Archana. So yes, definitely. And also Ormila, I think I mentioned. Bhakti Cohen is here in Gainesville. There's probably, I'm sorry I don't have names of other, but there's a lot of devotees that are counselors. I just give another example. I just came back from India, and my friend there, just an example of how the Vedic culture was, something about how the Vedic culture was years ago. So my friend is, now she's about 60-something, and she was telling me the story when she was in her 20s, so it was approximately 40 years ago. She was in South India, and she had just bathed and put on fresh clothing, so she was serving her father-in-law, but she had forgotten to put her bangles back on. So, so when she went to serve him, he wouldn't accept the service. He said, "No, I cannot accept service from you unless you are wearing bangles." So Prabhupada also liked the ladies to wear bangles. I remember one time he gave Arundhati a gold bangle. And I think one time he said that your arms, it's like your arms are naked unless you have bangles on. So this is just it's a minor point, but an example of the Vedic culture. And just like one of our godbrothers also is from South India, and he was telling me that when he was a child, if he drank water and if he touched the cup to his lip, his mother would chastise him heavily. So he got out of that habit from when he was tiny. So that's just another example, a minor point, but of the Vedic culture. So, looks like we have a couple minutes left for a couple more stories about Prabhupada. In April of 1977, Prabhupada was in Juhu, which is Mumbai, was Bombay then. There was an interview with Mr. Koshi, who was the assistant editor of a magazine called The Current. And this is one of his questions. There are several million like me who do not see how it is sinful to drink tea and coffee. So this is his question. Prabhupada's answer: millions of zeros does not mean one. Zero is zero. If there are 7 million zeros added together, you cannot make one. Okay. Prabhupada's question, or somebody's question to Prabhupada, sorry. What is humility? And we always think, what is humility? We think, well, it means to be quiet and shy and humble, in a subservient attitude. But Prabhupada's answer: humility is to act boldly for Krishna. Well, you think, well, how can that be? Humility is that. Well, sometimes, for example, we may be going on book distribution, means trying to sell our Krishna conscious, God conscious literature to people who that's the last thing on their mind. They may be rushing through an airport, and the last thing on their mind, is that I want to buy a book about God right now. This is like if you give them a list of 20 million things, that would be the last thing on their mind. So, and sometimes we may not be in the mood. Oh my gosh, I'm on the mental platform, or I'm tired today. But we have to do it, so we push ourselves. So that's real humility, to act boldly for Krishna. You don't want to, but you force yourself to. So that's real humility. They were on a morning walk in New York City, And Srila Prabhupada stopped, and he looked at some of the birds that were singing in a tree. And he said, "Oh, they are chanting Hare Krishna." The birds were singing. So Srila Prabhupada said, he often said a similar statement to this: if you just follow these 4 regulative principles and chant 16 rounds, then you will go back home, back to Godhead. I guarantee it. He paused and looked at everyone. I guarantee it. And so, one time he said, "This is not a bluff." So thank you very much. I'm sorry there were some difficulties with the audio here, but bless you all, and glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.